Hi, everybody. Welcome. I am so excited to have Candace Burch here today talking to us about hormones and balancing those suckers and just feeling good again as a woman. And so often there are just some fluctuations within our hormones that make our bodies do some crazy, crazy things. And so I have Candace here. She is a hormone health educator specializing in hormone testing and balance with her business, Your Hormone Balance. She was also the director of education at ZRT Labs for 12 years. And overall, Candace has 25 years experience in this field. So I feel very comfortable in saying that she is definitely an expert. Welcome, Candace. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, this is fun. Thanks for having me, Erica.
Oh, I'm so excited. I was just over the moon when you agreed to do this. I actually met Candace in 2014, I think. We were both doing a medical conference for integrative practitioners that are looking for solutions for their patients that get more to the root cause of some of their symptoms and integrating some natural practices in medicine, as well as using some allopathic practices as well. But I met her there. We were right next to each other. We both had booths, and we just hit it off well. And I just could not believe the amount of information that Candace had in this, little body of hers. And I mean, she just blew my mind. Oh, stop. But we just hit it off, and I just loved hearing her story about how she came into becoming an expert in hormones, what her own personal journey was. And so will you share with us, just kind of your first experience in, the hormone world, I guess, and how you came to this place?
Sure. I'll try to, it's kind of a long story, so I'll cut to the chase. So I'm one of those older moms. I had my first daughter when I was 37. And so about 10 years, when she was about 9, I had a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I went into the menopause or peri-menopause approach to menopause. So my hormones were fluctuating, and I didn't really know what was going on. I knew that I was probably getting there, but at a certain point you have to accept the M word, and it's hard. But I was having mood swings and a hot flash in between the mood swings just about every 20 minutes. And I kept drinking coffee, and I wasn't sleeping, and I was just, there was this morning that I erupted in some kind of little anger spat with my daughter, and I just looked at her and I thought, she is afraid of me. She was looking at me with these scared eyes like, Mommy, why are you being like this? Because I would just kind of shift into these horrible moods. And I wasn't a PMS type of person. I didn't have that symptom as when I had my regular cycle. So it was scary to my kids. And I just decided I'm going to hit the books here. I know something's going on. So the first book I read was What Your Doctor May Not Tell You About Menopause by Dr. John R. Lee, who was the guru of hormone balance in this country. He brought his studies with Katarina Dalton over in the UK, who was looking at women who had horrible PMS, the kind of pass me the shotgun type PMS where there's like 150 different symptoms. And she was finding that there were distinct fluctuations of hormones and imbalances that she was finding. And so Dr. Lee brought this information back to us. I read the book. I was like tearful. He's speaking to me. And I immediately learned by reading that there was actually a test I could do to test my hormone levels, that it was in saliva, that it was, non-invasive and would test a whole bunch of hormones, and that I could find out to what extent I was out of balance and then do something about it. So that was my intro into the whole thing. And actually I emailed Dr. Lee and said, I'm a health educator in menopause, and I really want to learn from you. I want to sit at your knee and study with you. What do I do? And he wrote back and said, well, I'm not doing any classes, but one of the foremost experts in the field is Dr. David Zava, and he's over there in Portland, Oregon, where you are. So why don't you call him? And I literally called him on the phone And Dr. Zava had me out, I think, the next week, and I was hired as his director of education. And then from there, it was nothing but learning, studying, and seeing thousands of test results come through with people who were suffering from hormonal imbalances. So that's kind of my background.
That's awesome. And that is the power right there of just asking questions. You just never know where those connections will be. And, you reaching out to Dr. Lee, connecting you with Dr. Zava, and, leading you to direct that piece of ZRT Labs, which is a very well-known lab. I reference clients as well to use that, as well as other practitioners that are looking for just a better way to do hormone testing. Now let's talk about what are something, because I work with clients, and they vary in age. So I would say, like between 35 and 55 is pretty much, my age range of women that I'm working with. What are the ages? How old were you when you started experiencing these symptoms? And you described some of those symptoms, but what is kind of the typical, like the light bulb moment where you're thinking, okay, like this is probably the age, and where am I in, menopause, pre-menopause, peri-menopause?
Yeah, I mean, there are actually three stages of the menopause. There's the pre-menopause, when you're in your 20s and 30s, and you should be making a nice balanced complement of hormones. And then there's the dreaded peri-menopause, which we call the sort of roller coaster years. I was 48 when I went into that, and that's pretty typical. You're in your 40-somethings, and you start to notice that you're getting these hot flashes and mood swings. You've got belly fat that you can't, that you used to be able to lose, and now you can't lose. You're depressed, or you're tearful, and you don't know why. And this can go on for like a good 10 years. The average age of menopause, which is defined officially as 12 sequential months without a period, is about 51. But in the interim, in that approach, that peri, meaning nearing menopause, you can go for 8-10 years with these roller coaster symptoms, because the ovaries are kind of, they're waning, they're packing up. It can take them 8 years to do so, but in that process, as they pack their bags, the hormones are going up and down, and we're having, we're on the seesaw. We're up on one end, we're down on the other, so we can have symptoms of dominance in some hormones and deficiency in others. We can have adrenal issues that are really plaguing us. So, but what we're seeing is that whereas it used to be your kind of mid-40s when the hormones start to fluctuate, it's getting to be earlier and earlier ages. I'm talking to a lot of women who are, like you, Erica, in their late 30s, or just having symptoms of imbalance as bad as anybody in menopause, and they're still in their 30s when they should be making. And I really think it's down to the abundance of stress that we are all, we have a very highly stressful life now, and living in the 21st century. So we're seeing it earlier and earlier.
Yeah.
This kind of hormonal imbalance that creates symptoms that just take people by surprise, and everybody's like, what, huh? I'm not in menopause yet. I'm not old enough, but why do I feel so lousy?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say, for myself, my history with Candace is, when we met, and I was just kind of sharing a little bit about, my current life situation, my lifestyle. And, I was working out at that time, really, really hard. And I had kind of just started coming out of that, because there was that burnout phase for me of, I was working out really early in the morning, waking up at about 2:30 in the morning, getting to the gym by 3, finishing up at 5, and then going to work, and I was a single mom of 3 kids and working full time. And I was also getting ready to start a graduate program. And so stress was definitely there. I knew that. And so Candace was so gracious, and she said, well, let's do a hormone panel. Let's see where you're at. And I don't know if you remember that, but that was really eye-opening, because it wasn't just hormones. They looked at your cortisol levels, DHEA. They are all hormones. But then it looked at sex hormones. So where was progesterone? Where where was estrogen, estradiol, testosterone, all of those things. And so there were some shifts there. Cortisol levels were all over the place, from what I remember then.
Yeah.
And, do you talk about some of that? Do you remember that?
Well, if we look, so I remember that you were, you had that classic imbalance of estrogen dominance, which is a term that Dr. Lee coined because of this chronic insufficient progesterone production that we see in so many women. And, as I was saying, you expect to see it more in menopausal women because their ovaries aren't producing as much hormone as they get older. But the thing with progesterone is that it's only, for the most part, produced upon ovulation. So if you're no longer ovulating, you're not going to make much progesterone, and then you're going to have some, what we call estrogen dominance, where estrogen is in excess relative to insufficient progesterone levels. And that's where you get, estrogen's a growth hormone. So it grows, divides, multiplies cells. So anything to do with estrogen is about growth. So we're talking about tender breasts, fear of hugging, lots of everything to do with growth. The estrogen is growing the egg in the ovary. It's thickening that blood-rich lining of the uterus. So and progesterone's job is to come out upon ovulation and say to estrogen, okay, you've done your thing. Now let's stop the thickening and the growth and let's feather the nest in case of a possible pregnancy. And then if that doesn't happen, the signal is to shed the lining, progesterone drops, estrogen drops. But if there's no ovulation, there's so many reasons why people don't ovulate. Younger people like you, it looked like you were not making enough progesterone in your test result. You were estrogen dominant at your tender age, just in your 30s. And we surmised that it might be the extreme workouts you were doing, and that you weren't sleeping, you were getting up really early. A lot of these things, constant chronic stress. And I like to say stress is good stress, bad stress, weddings, Christmas, birthdays, that's stress. Getting up in the morning is stress. The body, any response the body has to make to adapt to the realities of your day is stressful. But if stress becomes chronic or it takes center stage or becomes overwhelming, we don't ovulate. If you're running from a tsunami, the body in its wisdom isn't going to have you ovulating.
Right.
So we know that high performance athletes don't ovulate. We know that women that don't get enough protein, who maybe are strict vegans, don't ovulate as reliably. There are all kinds of reasons for lack of ovulation, but that may have been going on with you, that you weren't making enough progesterone to balance your estrogen. So there was that. And then you had some other imbalances. We look at the androgens, the DHEA and testosterone, and the 4 adrenal hormones that you test over the course of the day. You collected your saliva 4 times that day. In one day, you collected the minute you woke up, at noon, before your lunch, before your dinner, and in the evening. So that's a lot of information in one test result that we then connected back to many of the symptoms that you were suffering. And do you remember what were your symptoms at that time? I'll let you tell us that.
Yeah. So that, it was a little bit different. There was just kind of that overwhelming fatigue, where, even though you do have times of, good rest and, recovery from working out, it's just kind of that, I could fall asleep at any time and, it would be quick, just complete exhaustion. There was a little bit of, the irritability, really, snapping, at loved ones for, no real good reason.
Most in all the world.
Yeah. And I would say that those were kind of the main symptoms for me. And so, we did attribute that. Basically, I was kind of at a burnout place. I was nearing burnout. Just looking at my cortisol patterns, where they were really high. First thing in the morning, which is an unusual shift because typically people that have adrenal fatigue or burnout, that it's pretty low, especially in the morning.
Yeah.
But it's
Right.
also indicative of that, that burnout is coming when it's elevated so high for most of the day. But then my afternoon patterns were really, really low.
Right.
And then they'd pick back up again at night, which is a typical cortisol pattern for someone suffering from adrenal fatigue.
Tired but wired.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. And so, at that point, Candace was awesome. And I happened to be working with one of the foremost adrenal fatigue experts in the field, Dr. James L. Wilson, and, learning so much from him. And so, Candace said, it's really important that we are supporting your adrenals right now. So you definitely need to be utilizing his protocol. And then we talked about adding in some progesterone. And then there were a couple of trace minerals supplements that we were adding in at that time. And then it was like magic, Candace, just really being intentional in taking care of my body, completely stopping working out the way that it was. Like, I mean, it was nothing like what I was doing at all. And making sure that, I was getting, 7 to 9 hours of good uninterrupted sleep and prepping my room so that it was, definitely conducive to good sleep. And it was like this magic bulb, that happened. Like, oh my gosh, like I feel so good. I feel rested. I feel, calm and collected and, balanced. And then more shifts came. So it was just in this past year. So I just turned 40, and the craziest thing.
Look at that sheet.
I know. It's the formaldehyde, the neurotoxins, in all of our products.
Sure.
And this was completely different. And I sought Candace out because it was completely different. And it was kind of freaking me out because, I'm thinking, I'm not quite 40 yet. And this is, could I possibly be going through, like the start of menopause? Because my symptoms were, again, extreme fatigue. There was like this sudden weight gain, in that, belly area, like we had talked about, just getting like a lot of like headaches and this mental fogginess. And then the temperature, oh my gosh, like, the hot and the cold. And typically I tend to run a little bit cold. And then all of a sudden I was hot all the time. And, the people that I work with, they were suffering because I just kept cranking that AC down. And, it's the dead of summer, where it's 116 here. And, those poor people are wearing parkas.
Hot flash city.
I'm just so hot. And so that's made me seek Candace out again. And I said, okay, there's definitely something happening here. Can you help me? And so we did another hormone test, and that looked way different. At this time, my cortisol patterns were a little bit more normalized. There was a slight decrease in the afternoon. And it was just kind of this, the shift in sex hormones, and what that looked like. They'd never looked like that before. So Candace, is awesome in just taking those results and speaking it in, translating it in English for you to understand. And so she put me on this, great path to start, balancing. And, it's frustrating because it really is
Not an overnight fix.
Yeah. And so while I feel like, there were multiple things happening, like my thyroid all of a sudden was looking a little bit wonky, and, being diagnosed with subclinical hypothyroidism at that time. And, it was really important to continue with the adrenal support. But now, now kind of in this shift of, okay, now how do I balance my hormones again? So that's where I was with that. And I don't know, do you have any thoughts on, kind of what you saw in my patterns and how that shift happened over this past year?
Yeah, I mean, we're always in a state. I remember Dr. Zava would always be going like this when we're talking about balance, because balance is, you don't want to be on the seesaw where you're up here,
Right.
as a kid being up on the top and then you get slammed to the bottom. And,
Right.
that that's not where you want to be. Perfect balance is never going to be achievable. So what you're describing is you had made some changes, you got to feeling better. And every time we make some changes, if those become normalized and a part of our routine, then we've got that part covered. But then other things come up, life intervenes, and you know how it is when stress is chronic. Sometimes we forget to take our supplements. We don't get enough sleep. I remember going through the test results with a woman who had a real trauma in her relationship. Her husband informed her that he was in love with their son's best friend's father. And she lived in a small town, and everybody in town knew what was going on. And I'm going through her test results with her, and she's got the cortisol pattern should be, as you were saying, highest in the morning, because cortisol is it's called our master stress hormone, but it's also it's our get up and go hormone. It helps the body adapt to any stress from the moment you wake up in the morning through to your commute to work. If you're stuck in traffic, are you having a meltdown, or are you okay? Are you able to communicate at work, or are you always in an irritable, argumentative space? How are your relationships? All of these different things that go on. Well, so much of the imbalances that we suffer start with adrenal issues, because we aren't coping with stress well. We're not remembering to eat regularly, have high protein snacks, take our supplements, because many of these things, supplements like B6, there's a quartet of specially formulated B vitamins that Dr. Wilson, who you mentioned, Dr. Wilson's the guru of adrenal fatigue. He wrote the book Adrenal Fatigue, 21st Century Syndrome, and coined the term adrenal fatigue. And it's pretty important to understand adrenal fatigue. This is why I think
this is the book she's talking about right here.
Yeah. That book is a Bible must-read book. Because really what you're talking about, what you were going through, Erica, you were getting up at 3 a.m, going to work out intensely. I don't know what you were eating in there. You were a single mom raising 3 kids. Okay, this is your life. But if that is the case, then your adrenals need extra support to mount that, to get you up and going in the morning, to make your adrenals are like little bellows sitting on top of the kidneys. They're trying to produce enough cortisol to get us all through our hectic, crazy busy lives. And sometimes they can't make it if they can't constantly meet that demand. They will stay high. You'll see these high levels, as you were saying, high in the morning, or high flatlined all the way across, where they're not going down gradually to the lowest point at night for calming and sleep. You'll see these people jacked up, tired and wired. Or I was talking about this gal whose test results I was interpreting. She's sitting there and she's smoking and she's drinking whiskey, and she's telling me the story of what's going on in her life. And I'm looking at her adrenal pattern, and it's way low in the morning, like down in the bucket, bottom of and then it's way high at night, which made me think of the song Tossin' and Turnin' All Night. And indeed, she wasn't sleeping, and she said, that's a picture of my life. That's where I'm at. So now that was what was happening with her, but she was coping by smoking and drinking and doing everything opposite. What needs to happen when we do have a busy, abundant life full of good stress and bad stress, we need to hope that stress doesn't take center stage. But in the meantime, support our adrenals, because adrenal function, if it's dysfunctional, will impair thyroid function. You're mentioning your thyroid, and the thyroid and the adrenals work like bivalves. They have to. Adrenals need to be working properly for the thyroid to be working properly. So when the adrenals are compromised and struggling to keep you going, and they're kind of wobbling all over, and you can see that so clearly in that pattern of the pattern over the course of a day. You're measuring the diurnal pattern. If they're struggling to meet demand, that high level at some point is going to crash to a very low level. I talked to a gal yesterday who was telling me she's a single mom. She travels for her job. She had some kind of major issue last year, and she said, God, I'm surprised. I thought my cortisol levels would be really high because I'm so stressed. My job, she said her stress was like 4 on a scale of 1 to 5. And she said, I'm really surprised they're so low. And I mean, they were rock bottom low. And I said to her, yeah, I bet a couple of years ago they were high.
They were, yeah, exactly.
For you, they probably would have been flatline high, but now this is a total early warning sign of, adrenal fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
And many gals have evolving adrenal fatigue where there's a bit of a wobble. That's what was going on with you. You weren't exactly completely exhausted as she was, but that's the end game. And then when you get to that place, the thyroid stops being as functional as it is.
Mm-hmm.
You aren't making, the balance of other hormones suffers because cortisol, if it's high or low or way out of balance, trumps everything else. All the other hormones start to fall out of balance. Progesterone, for instance, is the precursor. If you look at a cascade of the hormones, the way they break down, progesterone goes right to cortisol. Mm-hmm. So it is a raw source material for the adrenals to make more cortisol upon demand. And if there's not enough progesterone around, if we're not ovulating because of our abundant overkill stress, then we're not making any progesterone, and the adrenals go wanting. Now they're taxed, tired, and they don't even have any raw material to work with. Mm-hmm. And then on another front, estrogen dominance, which is that, estrogen in excess relative to low progesterone. And by the way, you can be estrogen dominant even if your estrogen is low. But if your progesterone is that much lower, relatively speaking, you can still be estrogen dominant. And that in itself also is a blockade for thyroid function. Estrogen dominance is linked with what we call functional hypothyroidism, meaning if you're getting signs and symptoms of hypothyroid, you're tired all the time, you're sluggish, your metabolism may be sluggish, you're gaining weight that you can't lose, you're going, I used to always be able to lose weight, now I can't lose weight. Mm-hmm. The functional hypothyroidism is a condition where the thyroid is actually functioning. It's fine. The gland is fine. It's making its hormone, but that hormone is not converting to active hormone. With thyroid, there's thyroxine T4 is that most abundant thyroid hormone that the thyroid makes, but it's mostly inactive. It has to convert to T3, triiodithyronine. If it doesn't convert, then you're going to get symptoms of low thyroid. And it can be that all important conversion can be blocked by estrogen dominance, impaired cortisol, cortisol dysfunction, lack of adrenal fatigue, and lack of things like selenium, which you can get enough of by eating 4 Brazil nuts a day, or lack of iodine. Many people are deficient in these key trace minerals because our soil is denatured, or because we don't eat enough dark leafy greens, who eats all the right amount and balance of foods every day? Right. So that's where it gets to be important to, the adrenals are all about controlling blood sugar and insulin and your energy levels. And when they're not supported with proper nutrition and supplements like the B formulation that Dr. Wilson has created painstakingly to put the right numbers together. A lot of people take B12 alone. That's not good enough. You got to take the whole complex. Right. Yeah. And a lot of people with B12,
they're usually taking it, they're finding just kind of a capsule or, caplet, at the drugstore. And what they don't understand with B12 is that it is a supplement that isn't absorbed very well at all in that form. It does need to be in the form of, an IV or sublingual supplement where it goes under your tongue and it basically dissolves and melts, and it's getting into the bloodstream faster. And it's just an easily absorbable form. And so, people are like, well, I'm taking B12, I don't understand what the problem is, but supplements do matter, and the type of supplements that you're taking. I'm just a huge proponent of that.
And it's not just about supplements. I mean, certainly that's important. The bees are cofactors in breaking down the glucose molecule into energy. So we have to have that. There are all kinds of other things that we do need to try to get from our foods, et cetera. But I think lifestyle is becoming, I'm really seeing that a lot of people are having a very hard time relaxing anymore. Right. You know, they'll actually say, I don't know how to relax. I don't know how to turn off. And I mean, I probably sound like, you know, one of the old folks saying, you know, this constant on environment that we're in. We're expected to answer emails at 3 a.m. We work out at 3 a.m. We wake up at 3 a.m. and can't get back to sleep. We're not. I've said to people, make a list of the 10 things you love to do most in all the world. The things that give you joy, that are creative, that you love to do, that you used to do really well. And that's easy. It's easy to make that list. But then go back through that list and see, when is the last time you did any of that? And any one of those things. And I've talked to people who go, yeah, you know, I love to do scrapbooking. And my husband even put a studio together for me. And I haven't been in it in a year. Oh. Or I love to sing, but I don't play music anymore. Or, you know, there's all of that, and not really making the time to do the things that we love to do. No downtime. Right. Yeah. No downtime. The cell phone is always on, the laptop. And that's another point, lest I go on to my soapbox. But, you know, I would think people know this, but they don't all know this, that really important, at least an hour before bed, turning off that cell phone. Yes. Off. The psychological calm that even comes from turning your cell phone off. But there's a bigger reason, because cell phones and iPads, and I was just talking to a gal the other night who's telling me she's an insomniac. So what does she do when she can't sleep? She's on her laptop. And what is emitting from that laptop or that cell phone is a blue light, as we know, the blue light that goes directly into the pineal gland of the brain and absolutely shuts down melatonin production. Melatonin is the master sleep hormone. So we're making the problem worse, taking our cell phones to bed with us. There is, and the laptop, we're playing solitaire. When it better would be, if you can't sleep, read a book and don't have the light shining right in your eyes. Before bed, about an hour or two before bed, dim the lights in your house. You know, it's electric light that destroyed the natural circadian rhythms of dawn and dusk and our natural diurnal patterns. And that has really messed with our sleep patterns. But now the techno thing and the expectation that, you know, the boss who is up all hours expects you to get back to him, her at 3 a.m. No, that's not okay. You have to, have
boundaries.
Boundaries. I do not take calls after 8 p.m. I will get back to you within 24 hours, you know, whatever it is. Learning how to say no. I've talked to people. I'm one of the sandwich generation. I've got kids and I've got an elderly parent, and, you know, somewhere in there, their needs of me have to be balanced with my needs for me. Right. So I have to learn how to say no sometimes. No, you just can't drop the kids by anytime you like, or, you know, I have this or that going on. But I find it's really interesting how people are having a really hard time turning off, taking downtime for themselves, especially women. We're chronic, notorious. You know, they say on the airplane, put the oxygen mask on yourself first.
Oh my gosh. I use that analogy all the time. Yes.
Yeah, it's a good one. It makes sense. But that's what we're not doing enough of. And I think it's really interfering with so women are going to the doctor and going, I have this belly fat and I can't lose it. Put me on some thyroid. I know I've got a thyroid issue. No, what you've got is an adrenal issue. Belly fat's the body's way of telling you have too much stress. There's blood sugar that can't be used to break. It's not being used for energy. There's enough stored in the liver as glycogen. The cells are going, we don't need anymore. So what does the body do? It's like insulin resistance. It starts storing fat in your belly. The body doesn't know if you're stressed because you're running from a tsunami, or because you're getting a divorce, or because you just ate a bag of donuts. All it knows is that there's stress.
This is not normal. Yeah. This is not normal.
And we're going to store some fat right around her belly. Easy place to turn it into energy if needed, but this is a survival function. We're going to put it right there in case, energy for a rainy day. And that belly fat is not going to budge while you are, while we're in an unresolved chronic stress situation.
Right. Absolutely.
So that gets into supplements and supporting the adrenals and lifestyle as
right.
talking about.
Yeah, and I have loved that you've done such a good. I could probably leave. Like, I'm just gonna, let you take over here.
No,
because you're covering every single thing. And when I work with my, no, I love it. I love it. I mean, you do such great segues. You're just leading me right in. But when I work with women, it is usually women that are coming to me because they're having, kind of that weight onset, and they're feeling really tired. And they're like, okay, like something needs to change. But what I think is surprising them is I'm not a quick fix, person. So I'm not going to say, okay, like we're just going to hit it with this, really low cal, low fat diet, and you're going to work out a ton. I probably might have gone that way 4 years ago, or something. But just in what I've learned about the needs of the body and how stress and lifestyle impacts what's happening, I take it way deeper where I am breaking it down. I want to know what your lifestyle looks like. When are you waking up, and what is it like when you're waking, is it like a sudden, rush, to get out the door and you're just grabbing, some, high carb, high sugar breakfast, with coffee, to keep you going. And then you're consistently doing that throughout the day. And then, you're probably rarely getting a good, whole food meal, maybe at dinner time. But then even that, like a lot of, the women that I work with, they're busy moms and they have kids that are, very active in sports and activities. So then it's the drive-through diet. And like, that's just killing us.
Oh,
and
right.
So,
that's a good way to put it.
I love that you are, you're an advocate for, let's take a look at the whole picture, like what are the stressors in your life? And like you said, your body, I call the adrenal glands like the godfather, really, the hypothalamus is kind of like the godfather to let all the other systems know. And the hypothalamus is just kind of scanning your body every few seconds for stressors. And that, like Candace said, it's basically something that's dysregulated. Like, okay, what is different? What is not balanced? What is happening here? And, it doesn't know if you're running from a tiger or, if you're sitting in traffic or, you just got a nasty email from your boss or, you got into an argument with a friend. Like, your body doesn't know that, but it's like, oh my gosh, like she's dying. We've got to like keep her alive.
Yeah. Right.
So what would you say is, let's say like you are noticing some of these symptoms, and what would be your first step that you would suggest for a woman to take a look at like what truly is happening internally?
Well, I was, like I said, back in the day when I was having my first entry into menopause, I was so thrilled to find out that there was a test because, the average, over the 25 years I've been involved in, last 12 or 15 in the hormone field, the picture's changed significantly. The standard test used to be only in blood, and it would always be the woman in menopause who's moving into that phase. She's got hot flashes, night sweats, mood swings. She's gaining weight. She goes to the doctor. She gets an FSH test, the blood test testing follicle stimulating hormone, which is a signal from the brain that's telling the ovaries make hormone. If that level is, I'm cutting to the chase here, but if that level is high, the doctor would say, oh, your FSH is high. The signal to your ovaries is basically falling on deaf ears. You're in menopause. Here's some HRT, synthetic hormone replacement, which generally was Prempro, pregnant mare's urine, estrogen derived from pregnant mare's urine, and a synthetic progestin, both of which have been shown in the Women's Health Initiative in 2003 to be quite dangerous for women. and, doubling the risk of blood clots, 30% increase in heart attacks. There's breast cancer risk is huge. Dr. Zava will tell you 97% of breast cancers are linked to imbalances of hormones, particularly high estrogens and low progesterone. So testing these things can give you a lot of information about to what extent are your hormones out of balance, and you need to look at estrogen and progesterone, the ratio between them. You need to look at the anabolic hormones, testosterone and DHEA, which, you think sex drive, libido with testosterone, but testosterone and DHEA work together to build bone, to build lean muscle. They have a lot to do with your metabolic rate. So if those levels are out of balance, if they're low, you're going to be lacking stamina and energy. You're going to be sore after exercise. You're going to have a low libido. You're going to be maybe feeling kind of depressed. You don't know why. You may not be able to think clearly. If you're high in the androgens, you may have acne, skin breakouts, excess facial hair. You've heard of polycystic ovarian syndrome. All of these things are stressors. And then if your adrenals are, too low in the morning and too high at night, or flatlined high all the time, this is news you can use. I mean, these are black and white numbers that give you a baseline so that you can say, wow, because the test result is, it's giving you numbers, it's showing you the extent to which your hormones are out of balance, it's identifying imbalances that are basically silent. How many people become their symptoms? I'm tired all the time. I'm just itchy, bitchy, crabby, flabby. I'm always like this. My mother was always like this. Yeah. My grandmother was like, no, I mean, this is an imbalance that is not, you should not have horrible heavy periods that send you to your room every time you have a cycle. You should not be living with migraines. You should not be dragging yourself out of bed and then unable to sleep at night. You should not be having belly fat that you absolutely cannot budge that keeps getting worse. So testing, I think, I'm a real advocate for testing, because I think, we test everything else. But doctors will test your insulin, they'll test your thyroid. These hormones that are so fundamental, that so underpin, they rule our emotional, mental, physical life. Without them, women in menopause will say to me, oh, I'm done. I'm in menopause. I'm done with all that. It's like, no, you're not, honey, because women used to live to be 50, 100 years ago. Now we're living to be 85, 90. That's a whole third of our lives. We need those hormones. It's not just about relieving hot flashes and tiredness. It's about protecting your bones and your brain and your breasts and your heart and your blood vessels. Yes. These hormones have a job to do. Yes. So we need them to be in balance. If they're not in balance, we get lots of symptoms. And if it continues unaddressed with silent imbalances, untested, can end up being a breast cancer someday, or fibroids, or endometriosis, or extreme exhaustion, or, weight you never can lose. And now we're looking at obesity and diabetes and metabolic syndrome and heart disease. So getting a handle on this starts with testing. It's a simple test. It's saliva. And the reason it's actually, you can attest to this. Saliva is the gold standard for testing adrenal function.
It is. Yeah, definitely.
Because you have to test that curve over the course of one day. So you're not, and so you have to be testing at optimal times. Where are you going to get a blood test at bedtime? And also, you don't want to be sticking yourself with needles when you're trying to measure your stress response.
Exactly.
So saliva also is the way to get the level of hormone that has escaped the bloodstream and is moving into the target tissues of the body where hormones do their work. Because hormones are carried in the bloodstream on by carrier proteins on red blood cells. So there's a lot of hormone in your bloodstream. That's why blood tests, the doctor may say, you're fine, you got plenty of hormone. Well, yeah, but how much of it has left the bloodstream and is active in the tissues? That's what I want to know. And that's where that testing, when you get those levels and you record your symptoms, by the way, and then that can be correlated and give you a whole bunch of information that can absolutely be life-changing, because then you can say, okay, I've got a baseline, I got some numbers, wow, there's a picture of what I'm going through, and now I can make these changes in my diet, in my supplement regime, in my lifestyle.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think people find it very life-changing. It's important information.
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
you.
Definitely.
And never a quick fix, like you say, but it's a
No,
process.
I really wish it was, if I could like just flip the switch and, make it all feel good again, I certainly would do that. But at the same time, I also understand, the value of, while it felt like a lot of this just came on overnight, it really wasn't. It was
Right.
lifestyle that was lending to this, and going through a really terrible divorce, in
Yeah.
2012, and then
That's a major trauma.
yeah,
Hormones release stress index. It's right up.
exactly. Yeah. That was, kind of, maybe the start of it. There was probably, precursors before that. And then,
No doubt.
going, the women's saga of, terrible, relationships following that, like, oh my goodness, like that's a stressor. And then just trying to manage everything. And like you said, women, we are pleasers, and we try to take everything on and do all the things. And so I definitely see a lot of these patterns. And so I am a huge advocate, especially when some of the tricks, of some simple, lifestyle changes, diet, bed routine, that type of thing. When we
Yes.
notice that things aren't still not being alleviated by, some of these changes, then I always recommend hormone testing, because it's indicative of something much deeper going on. And so, Candace has been she basically gives you like a roadmap of, this is where you're at right now. And this is how, we start to correct that.
I love to refer to people like Erica to correct that, because I'm not a health coach. I don't, I can help people do the test, understand their test results, and provide, the what now sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when you really to stick to the program to get some progress, people really need to work with someone like you, because people need a lot of, most people need a lot of support, and they need to check in, be accountable, and
Exactly.
and then hopefully retest in a few months once you've made changes to see what's working for you. So then you can make some adjustments. You as the coach can make adjustments for people's what they're doing, because there's always, you get 8 things right, and then there are these just 2 niggly little things you still got to deal with.
Right. Absolutely.
Process.
Yes. And oh my gosh, like Candace, I could talk to you for hours and hours. Because there's just so much more. We might have to do like a part 2, or something like that, because there's just so many other, issues. And, for example, if you've had a hysterectomy, like what does that look like? Like we might have to like dive into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
But Candace, will you let us know how, my viewers, my audience can reach you, if they're interested, definitely if you're working with me, I'm giving you Candace's information because, I just feel like it's very important. It would be remiss of me to not give you that information so that we can look at that full picture. But how can they reach you?
Well, anybody that's an Erica Eller Wellness listener today,
Okay.
to just email me at Candace. I don't have a code. My daughters are helping me get that sort of thing sorted out, because that's the stress.
That's okay. Yeah. Have boundaries. It's okay. We can figure it out.
I just say, just email me, Candace B. Well, Candace B. E. Well @gmail.com, and say, hey, I was on Erica Eller Wellness, and I heard you interviewed, and I'd really be interested in testing. And if you email me, I would be happy to offer you a 10% discount on any test kit consult package that you see on my website, which is yourhormonebalance.com. And just let me know that you want to do that, and we'll go from there. But that's
awesome.
simple. I think that's simple.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to go back, Candace can be found at yourhormonebalance.com. And if you email her at Candace, CANDACE BE WELL at gmail.com.
Right.
Then she will be extending a really, really awesome deal for you, so that you can go ahead and get part of this puzzle solved for yourself. So thank you, Candace, again, so much for being here. So much information. And I promise you guys, if you love this, like we will definitely do this again, because Candace is just so fun and so relatable and so much, she just has so much knowledge. I just love her. Love her, love her, love her.
Same right back at you.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks, Candace.
Okay. Very welcome.
Bye.
To be continued.
Yes,
Bye.
absolutely. Okay.